My name is Naomi Trinh, and for the past 11 years, I've been invisible by design. As a court clerk assigned to the 5th District Superior Court in Baltimore, my job isn't glamorous. I prepare testimony records, file exhibits, and monitor audio devices during preliminary hearings. I'm the one in the corner typing quietly, not speaking unless spoken to, and certainly never drawing attention to myself. I like it that way. After years of working in a building that traffics in pain, divorces, restraining orders, probation violations, you learn to be still, impartial, unseen. But nothing prepares you for the day when silence becomes complicity. It was a Monday morning when I was handed the assignment, a 3-day internal review hearing involving potential misconduct within the city's police department. High profile, sensitive, closed session. "You're the only one I trust to handle this cleanly," said Mr. Hill, the lead court administrator. "No leaks, no errors." I nodded. Understood. I didn't know the name of the officer being investigated until I opened the file in the clerk's chamber an hour later. Raymond J. Wells. My vision blurred. I sat down. The walls around me receded. For a moment, I was 23 again, new to the courthouse, new to everything. Fresh from finishing paralegal studies with honors, desperate to believe in law order process, and he had ruined it all. If you've ever believed in justice only to be betrayed by the system, hit that like button. You're not alone in this story. I closed the file, took a breath, and opened it again. Allegations, coercion, suppression of evidence, inappropriate use of force, retaliation. Retaliation. I knew that word intimately. The hearing was scheduled to begin at 9:00 a.m. the next day. I was to set up the recording devices, distribute printed transcripts, and log every word spoken in that small, locked room labeled Testimony Room C. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning above me like a silent judge. I hadn't spoken his name in 10 years. I had trained myself to delete every trace of that brief, awful chapter. Even the memory of the clinic, the whispering nurses, the signed forms I never read. I told no one what happened, because no one would have believed me. And now fate had looped back like a cruel clerk of its own, filing me next to him once more. The courthouse was colder than usual on Tuesday. My heels echoed down the corridor as I carried the digital recorders and sealed evidence binders toward Room C. The door was open. I stepped inside. Gray walls, one rectangular table, 6 chairs, a wall-mounted camera. Nothing extraordinary. But the air felt charged. I placed the equipment on the desk, connected the mics, and began testing. As I adjusted the sensitivity dial, I caught a reflection in the dark monitor screen. A woman, thin, elderly, pushing a janitor's cart. She stood quietly in the doorway, watching me. "You're early," I said, trying to sound casual. The woman nodded but said nothing. She had deep lines on her face and wore a faded blue uniform with a stitched patch. Loretta. "Sorry, are you assigned to this room today?" She didn't respond right away. Then, with a gravelly voice, she said, "Room 307 used to be my favorite, before they turned it into storage. This one hears too many lies." I turned fully to face her. "Excuse me," but Loretta just smiled, pushed her cart forward, and continued down the hall without another word. At 8:55 a.m., the room began to fill. First came the committee chair, Commissioner Bailey, flanked by 2 assistants. Then the observer from the mayor's office, and finally the respondent, Officer Raymond J. Wells. He walked in as if nothing weighed on him. Taller than I remembered, thicker around the middle, but the eyes were the same steel blue, always scanning, always calculating. His gaze passed over me without reaction. No recognition, no flicker of discomfort. I was a footnote. "Ms. Trinh," said Commissioner Bailey, taking his seat, "you may begin the recording." My hands moved on their own. Power on, red light blinking, microphones live. The hearing commenced. By noon, I'd typed over 7,000 words of testimony. Most of it procedural reviewing departmental policies, chain of command clarifications, redacted personnel files. But beneath the surface, something was wrong. The first witness, Officer Linares, had submitted a written complaint last month citing abuse of power and suppression of evidence in a 2020 narcotics raid. On the record, however, she stumbled through vague answers. She couldn't recall key details. She deferred. She looked afraid. When cross-questioned, she recanted portions of her complaint entirely. The committee looked uncomfortable. The mayor's observer made a note in her folder. I didn't blink. I just typed. After a short break, a second officer, Marcus Dent, was called. Same pattern. His written statement had been clear accusatory, but in the room, it evaporated. I may have misunderstood the report, he said. Things can look different under stress. Raymond sat in silence, arms folded. Not smug, just certain. The chair called for a recess. As the room cleared, I unplugged the recorders and copied the files onto the encrypted drive. When I turned around, Loretta was in the doorway again. You ever been in a room where everyone's pretending not to smell the fire? She asked. I blinked. I'm not sure I follow. She moved closer. You're not here just to type, she said. I can see it in your face. That man, he burned something in you, didn't he? If Loretta's words gave you chills, leave a comment below. Should Naomi stay silent or finally speak up? I froze. Why would you say that Loretta's gaze didn't waver? I've worked this building 31 years. I know ghosts when I see 'em. And you, Miss Naomi, you're carrying one that wants to speak? She reached into the pocket of her smock and handed me a folded piece of paper. It was yellowed. Faint handwriting in ballpoint pen, 2013. Bathroom hallway, recorder in jacket. She cried after he threatened her job. My breath caught. What is this? I whispered. You tell me, she said, already turning away. I unfolded the paper again. My fingers trembled. In 2013, I had tried to document the moment after he told me, if you keep the baby, I'll make sure no courthouse in Maryland ever hires you again. I had carried a cheap recorder in my coat pocket. I thought it had malfunctioned. But the timestamp, the hallway, the jacket, somebody had kept it. That night, I unlocked the old plastic tub in the back of my closet. My records, boxes of outdated cables and CDs and receipts. At the bottom, a dusty brown envelope marked Archive A. Inside, a mini tape labeled 307 REC 3. I didn't remember naming it that. My hands moved without permission. I slid it into the adapter, clicked play. Crackling. Footsteps. Then Raymond's voice. Clear, cold. It's not a request, Naomi. It's the cost of staying here. Silence. Then my own voice, barely audible. What happens if I say no, a scoff? Then we both know how this story ends. I stopped the tape. I was shaking. Not because of fear, because I wasn't invisible anymore. I arrived early the next morning. Room C was still locked, silent, sealed like a vault of things unspoken. I held the mini tape in my pocket like a relic, warm from my palm, heavier than it should have been. The building was mostly dark. Only the emergency lights above the elevators flickered faintly. I didn't head to the testimony room. Instead, I walked 3 floors up to archives. The clerk on duty, Darius, early 20s, distracted, was half asleep behind a plexiglass partition. I signed in quietly, used my badge, and made my way into the file room. Rows and rows of records categorized by year and case ID. I already knew the drawer. Internal suppressed, discretional, 2013 to 2014. I pulled the drawer open, ran my fingers along the cases, and there it was. Incident number 8072B. Internal complaint. No disciplinary action taken. The complainant's name was blacked out, but the summary was familiar. Female clerk. Alleged misconduct by a supervising officer. Dispute over chain of command. Case dropped due to lack of evidence. No further action. I scanned the notes, cold, clinical, efficient, and felt a bitter taste rise in my throat. It was me. It had always been me. And the record made it look like I had lied. When I entered the hearing room again, the air was thicker. Raymond had arrived already seated and chatting with the mayor's observer like they were old colleagues. He glanced at me once, barely, and returned to his conversation. I took my position, reset the recorders, checked the microphones, fingers poised on keys. Day 2. Witness Julia Ramirez. I stiffened. Julia. I hadn't seen her name in the original witness list. Someone must have added her overnight. When she entered, I felt the room tilt. Petite frame, brown curls pulled tight, steel in her eyes that wasn't there 10 years ago. She walked with the posture of someone who had prepared for this moment. Raymond's smile faltered. Julia raised her right hand and was sworn in. I began typing. Ms. Ramirez, Commissioner Bailey said, "You submitted a statement indicating you witnessed misconduct by Officer Wells during an incident in July 2016. Can you tell us what happened?" "I'd rather not," she said bluntly. The room shifted. "I submitted that statement 2 weeks ago. And since then, I've been followed. My car was keyed, and I got an envelope in my mailbox with a single bullet inside." The commissioner blinked. "Excuse me." Julia looked at Raymond. "I was 19. I was stupid. He told me I'd get a record if I didn't cooperate with his version of events. So I did. I signed whatever he gave me. But I've carried it ever since." I typed faster. Raymond leaned forward, voice calm. "Are you suggesting I had anything to do with threats against you?" Julia didn't blink. "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you what happened. And what you did." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I can't do this. I thought I could, but I won't survive it." She stood up abruptly and walked out. Her heels echoed through the hallway like punctuation marks on a statement left half said. Did Julia's walkout leave a lump in your throat? Share this video with someone who needs to know brave voices still exist. I froze. The entire room watched her leave. Raymond exhaled theatrical and looked at the committee with a practiced expression of regret. "Emotional instability," he said. "It's understandable." I felt something hot rising in me. This was the pattern. One by one, they came forward, and one by one, they broke apart. I knew why. Because the system made breaking the easier option. At 3:15 p.m., the committee called a recess. I remained in the room, finishing logs, eyes glued to the screen. The door creaked. Michael Ash, the assistant district attorney assigned to observe, stepped back in. He was younger than I expected. Sharp suit, wide shoulders, probably good at debate. He glanced at me. "Naomi." "Right," I nodded. "I noticed you paused the transcription during the Ramirez segment," he said, casually. "I didn't," I replied. "Recorder 2 glitched. I recovered the audio file and manually synced the timecode. It's logged." His brows lifted slightly. "Efficient." A pause. "You've been here how long? 11 years. And you've worked a lot of these internal hearings?" "A fair number." He stepped closer, dropped his voice. "Do you believe them?" I didn't respond. "Ramirez, Linares, Dent." I looked at him. "Do you?" Ash smiled, faintly. "I believe people tend to speak louder with their silence than their words." And with that, he left. I left work an hour later, walking briskly in the twilight. The city was buzzing with the usual end-of-day noise horns, sirens, heels on pavement. I turned a corner and saw Julia standing alone near a parking garage. I hesitated, then crossed. "You came," I said. She didn't turn. I lasted 15 minutes longer than I thought I would. "You did more than you know." She faced me now. "Do you still have that recording?" From back then, I nodded. "I need to hear it." We stood in my car engine, off doors shut. I played the tape. Raymond's voice. My silence. The threat. The humiliation wrapped in civility. Julia cried, softly, the way someone cries when something they buried for a decade has just clawed itself back up through the dirt. "I thought I was alone," she whispered. "You weren't," I said. "None of us were." She turned toward me. "Are you going to testify I'm not a witness?" I replied. "I'm the clerk. I'm not allowed to give testimony. But you could request a statement be entered." I looked down. That would be a direct violation of court protocol. It could cost me my position. Julia leaned closer. "Isn't that what he's counting on?" Back home, I pulled out the sealed backup drive from my locked drawer. Transcripts, audio, archived logs, all with metadata intact. I placed them in a new folder on my desktop F307. Clean copy. Then I opened a blank document, and I began to write. My statement. At 6:40 a.m., the next morning, as light crept through the city fog, I emailed a PDF to Michael Ash with the subject line statement for record, Naomi Trinh, clerk. In the body, I wrote, "I understand the implications of this submission. I do not seek anonymity. I only seek the record to be complete." At 7:12 a.m., he replied, "Meet me in room C before the hearing. You won't be alone." Room C was colder than before. Or maybe it was just me heart drumming too loudly in my chest as I waited in the corner like always. But this time I wasn't only the recorder, not just the clerk. I was carrying a truth I had spent 10 years trying to bury beneath protocol neutrality silence. Michael Ash arrived first. He nodded at me, sharp professional. "I read your statement," he said. I waited for the usual warnings, the polite discouragements. But instead, he handed me a small folder. "Commissioner Bailey approved your request to be added as a supplemental witness. We're moving your testimony to the end of today's session." My breath caught. "Is this official?" He nodded. "Your position as clerk is suspended for the duration of the session. You'll be replaced by a temp this afternoon. You'll testify as a private citizen." My palms were slick with sweat. "And after today, we'll deal with that after today." He didn't say you're safe. He didn't say you'll be fine. But he looked at me like I wasn't invisible anymore. The morning dragged. 2 more officers were brought in. Both gave statements riddled with hesitation, legal tap dancing around language, like as far as I recall, and at the time it seemed reasonable. It was clear by then that the case was unraveling, or being unraveled. Raymond sat through it all with unshaken posture, arms folded like a king on trial by peasants. I caught him looking at me once, just once, and I saw something flicker. Was it recognition? Calculation? Whatever it was, he looked away quickly. At noon, a lunch recess was called. I didn't eat. I paced the corridor outside room C, my footsteps echoing off marble floors. At 12:47 p.m., my phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. "Check room 204, supply closet. Now." I hesitated, then moved. Room 204 was 2 floors up a long, unused deposition suite. The hallway smelled of dust and forgotten things. The supply closet door was cracked slightly. I pushed it open. Inside on a chair sat a battered brown box. No note, no label. Just my name written in faded Sharpie, Naomi T. 2013. My hands trembled as I lifted the lid. Inside, a manila folder marked clinic invoice. Private. A cassette labeled L6 Night Hall, a yellow sticky note. She told the truth. No one listened. Don't let it happen again. The handwriting, I knew it. Loretta. By 1:45 p.m., the room was full again. But this time, Julia Ramirez sat beside the press liaison. Her eyes met mine. She didn't smile, but her nod was enough. Michael stood. "Final testimony today will come from Naomi Trinh, former clerk of the court, appearing as a civilian witness." I stood slowly. Raymond shifted in his chair. Just slightly, but I saw it. For the first time in 2 days, he looked unsure. I took my seat across from the committee. Ms. Trinh, Commissioner Bailey said you understand this hearing is not a criminal trial. Your testimony will be recorded and included in the official internal report, but any perjury will be pursued under state law. I understand. Then please begin. I opened my folder. Inside were no notes. I didn't need them. I began working at this courthouse in 2012. I was 23, eager, idealistic. I believed in the process, rules, protocol structure. I still do. Pause. In 2013, I was assigned to assist a supervisory officer on compiling transcript errors for internal audit. That officer was Raymond J. Wells. A shift in the room. Raymond remained still, but his jaw tightened. Over the course of several weeks, that assignment changed. I was asked to work late unsupervised off the books. And one evening, he cornered me outside the 6th floor filing suite and made an ultimatum. I was pregnant at the time. Gasps were muffled behind fingers and notebooks. He told me to get rid of it, that if I didn't, I would be blacklisted from every court in the district, that he'd make sure I'd never work in law again. I didn't cry. I had done that already, in 2013, and again in 2015, and quietly every year since. He said it wasn't a threat, just a consequence. The commissioner's pen had stopped moving, so had everyone else's. I terminated the pregnancy, not because I wanted to, but because I believed him. I took a breath. Afterward, I attempted to report the incident through internal channels. The file exists, incident number 8072B. But the case was closed, citing insufficient evidence. I opened the box Loretta had left. And yet, evidence did exist. It was simply ignored. I produced the cassette. A janitor named Loretta Thomas kept this. A recording from the hallway that night. I only learned of it this week. I've submitted it to the committee in digital format. In it, you'll hear Officer Wells issue the threat exactly as I described it. Michael placed a copy on the table. The original has been authenticated and logged. Raymond stood suddenly. This is a setup. That recording is inadmissible. Who even uses tapes anymore? Bailey raised a hand. Officer Wells, please be seated. Raymond's face flushed. She's doing this for attention, for revenge. Everyone has skeletons. She's not some saint. I looked at him. No, I'm not a saint. I'm a clerk. I was never supposed to speak. That's what made me perfect. I turned back to the committee. But silence doesn't protect justice. It buries it. The session adjourned 30 minutes later. The committee would deliberate. A formal review board would open. The mayor's office requested full transcripts. But none of that mattered to me right then. Because when I stepped out of room C, Julia was waiting. And so was Loretta. Leaning against her janitor's cart, arms crossed. She smiled at me for the first time. You said it, girl. I nodded. Thanks to you. No, she said. Thanks to you. I just kept the receipts. You're the one who cashed them in. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table. Across from me on the table lay a resignation letter. Unsigned. I stared at it, then folded it in half and placed it back in the drawer. Because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't done yet. The headlines broke before I even reached the courthouse the next morning. Veteran officer under fire after explosive testimony. Audio recording suggests pattern of coercion and retaliation. Court clerk steps forward with decade-old allegations. My phone buzzed nonstop. Unknown numbers. Journalists. A voicemail from a reporter at the Baltimore Ledger. Another from someone claiming to be a producer at a true crime podcast. I turned the phone off and placed it in the glove compartment. This wasn't about publicity. It never had been. And I knew better than to think speaking once meant the battle was over. No, this was the part where the backlash begins. When I entered the courthouse, everything felt sideways. The security guard who used to wave me through without looking now gave me a slow nod of respect. The elevator ride to the third floor was silent, but I felt their eyes. No one said anything, but they didn't need to. I had violated the code of silence. I was no longer one of them. Good. In room C, Raymond was already seated, this time alone. No lawyer, no press rep, no smirk. His eyes were bloodshot, hands twitching as he adjusted the cuffs of his shirt. For the first time, he looked human, and that made him more dangerous. Michael Ash entered, flanked by a district representative and a deputy from Internal Affairs. Behind them came Commissioner Bailey. "All right," Bailey said as he settled in. "Let's get to it." Today wasn't about witnesses. It was about evidence. Michael stood. "We have submitted into record 3 items: a digital recording authenticated from 2013, a secondary statement corroborated by a former janitorial staff member, and a written testimony from Ms. Trinh detailing a pattern of coercion spanning multiple years." He placed a final envelope on the table. "We've also received an anonymous deposition from a civilian whose son was arrested in 2016 and claimed Officer Wells offered to drop charges in exchange for physical favors." Raymond laughed, short and sharp. Anonymous. Convenient. Michael didn't blink. Scared. "They're lying. So say you. But not the recorder. Not the transcripts. Not the metadata." Bailey leaned forward. "Officer Wells, you are not on trial. Not yet. But your promotion is suspended pending full departmental review. Your badge and firearm will be surrendered by end of day." Raymond didn't speak, just sat very still, until finally he said, "She was nothing." His voice was low, measured. "I gave her a break, pulled her out of obscurity, and she turned it into this circus." He looked at me then, directly. "Was it worth it, Naomi, trading your life here for 30 minutes of vindication?" I looked right back. Yes. When the session ended and the committee filed out, Raymond remained. Michael lingered beside me. "Do you want an escort to your car? I'm fine." He hesitated. "You're not. But, okay." As I gathered my belongings, Raymond spoke again, quieter this time. "She wasn't the only one. You know that, right?" I stopped. "She kept her silence because she had to. But me, I never asked anyone to keep secrets. They offered them freely. People protect what benefits them." I turned. "You're wrong." He shrugged. "I'm retiring either way. Maybe not with honors, but I'll still walk away. Pension intact." Maybe I said. "But your story's not yours anymore. It belongs to every person you tried to erase." I left him there, alone in the room that once made him untouchable. Outside the courthouse, Julia was waiting. She wore sunglasses, hair pulled back. Despite the sun, she looked pale. "They froze my bank account," she said without preamble. "What I got a call this morning. IRS flagged me for tax inconsistencies." I know exactly where that came from. My stomach dropped. "I'm so sorry." She shrugged. "Expected it. I filed a report. If they push harder, I'll go public." "You started a storm, Naomi. They think silence is still currency, but people are done paying for things with their dignity." Behind her, a black SUV pulled up. The window rolled down. Inside was a familiar face. "Loretta. You girls coming?" she said with a grin. We drove across town to the community center on 9th and Park. Loretta unlocked a side door and let us in. "Been holding on to these since the Ferguson file in 16, she muttered. "Didn't know if they'd ever matter." Inside the supply closet was a second box, larger, labeled Misconduct Unprocessed Community Anonymous Submissions. Inside were dozens of envelopes, testimonies, dates, incident numbers. Most were unsigned. Some came with shaky handwriting. One had a Polaroid, another a hospital invoice. "These are real?" I asked. She nodded. "Nobody ever wanted them. Until now." Julia was already sorting them. "If we can get 3 to testify under oath, we can reopen the file as a pattern case. He won't just lose his pension, he'll face charges." Loretta chuckled. And all from a cassette tape and a girl who finally said, "Enough." I looked at her. "You kept that tape for 10 years. Why? Loretta's eyes softened. "Because someone once didn't keep mine, and it cost me everything." She didn't say more. She didn't need to. That night, I received an email from the Office of Inspector General. "Ms. Trinh, you are being considered for a civilian oversight committee to develop ethical review procedures within internal judiciary operations. If interested, please respond with availability for a preliminary interview." I stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. Instead, I opened a new Word document and began typing the anatomy of silence notes from a room no one noticed. Not for publication, not yet, just to get it out. 2 days later, the Baltimore Tribune published an op-ed. Unsigned, but I knew who wrote it. The last paragraph read, "Sometimes justice doesn't come with a gavel or a verdict. Sometimes it's just the sound of one voice breaking a silence. And then another. And then another." I printed it, taped it inside the top drawer of my desk. Because that was the sound I'd waited my whole life to hear. 3 months later, I stood at the front of a modest lecture hall at Chesapeake Community College. A whiteboard behind me read Ethics 101, Silence Systems and Speaking Up. My nameplate said Adjunct Lecturer Naomi Trinh. I never thought I'd be here. If you believe forgotten voices deserve the chance to lead, hit subscribe. This journey is far from over. Not after the hearing, not after everything that followed. Raymond's case had gone federal. Julia's testimony, combined with the anonymous depositions Loretta had collected, was enough to initiate a grand jury investigation. He wasn't arrested yet, but the badge was gone and the pension frozen. He filed a civil suit against the city 2 weeks after the hearing. Claimed defamation. Claimed character assassination. He didn't sue me. He knew better. I'd turned in my resignation 3 weeks after my testimony. Not because I was forced to, but because I was done. The courtroom had been a sanctuary once. Then it became a cage. Now I was building something else, something of my own. I taught 2 classes a week. I consulted for a local nonprofit on justice reform. I met with young women in whispered conversations after class, some of whom were still learning how to say the word no and mean it. And I wrote, at night mostly, long stretches of sentences I never thought I'd let myself form, about what it meant to be erased, about the invisible currency of silence, about how reclaiming your voice doesn't feel like shouting, it feels like surviving. It was a Thursday when I got the letter. Not an email, a letter, handwritten, no return address, inside a photo, black and white, faded. Me, 23, wide-eyed, filing papers in the main hallway. In the background, Raymond watching. On the back, scribbled in blocky ink, "You were never invisible." No signature, no explanation, just confirmation. I kept in touch with Julia. She'd moved to D.C., working for a victim advocacy network. She'd gone fully public, now interviews, panels, even a TEDx talk. We talked twice a month. No scripts, no trauma sharing. Just 2 women who survived the same system, now building something beyond it. Loretta, however, was gone. She passed peacefully in her sleep just 6 weeks after the final hearing. Heart failure. I attended the funeral. There weren't many people there, just a few old neighbors, 1 niece, 2 courthouse janitors. But Julia flew in for it. And the mayor's observer came quietly, no entourage. I delivered a eulogy. She didn't just clean the courthouse, I said. She cleaned its conscience. They buried her with her keyring, the one with the brass tag labeled 307. I still dream of her sometimes, standing in that hallway, watching me, smiling like she knew I'd get there eventually. That winter, I visited Room C again. The court had assigned it to family hearings now. Soft lighting, child-friendly chairs. There were crayon drawings taped to the walls. The testimony table was still there, but the microphone had been replaced with a plastic box of markers. I sat in the same chair I'd used during my testimony, closed my eyes, breathed, then got up and walked out without looking back. In April, I received a phone call from a publisher. They'd read a draft of my manuscript, an anonymous submission a student of mine had apparently forwarded without telling me. They were interested. I said no, not yet. I wasn't ready to hand it over. Not until I was sure the story belonged to me and not just the version people wanted to hear. Too often, trauma becomes currency. Pain becomes product. Mine wouldn't. At the end of the semester, one of my students stayed behind after class. Her name was Alina. Quiet, brilliant, the kind who always sat near the exit but never left early. She waited until the room emptied, then approached me with a manila envelope. "This isn't for class," she said, voice trembling. "It's from my mother." I opened it slowly. Inside was a report, internal HR complaint dated 1997. A courthouse, different city, same pattern. The accused, a judge. The complainant. "Her mother, I found it in a shoebox after she passed," Alina whispered. She never spoke about it, but she never went back to law school. I looked at her. "What do you want me to do with this?" Alina shook her head. "I don't know, but I didn't want it to disappear." I nodded and placed the file in my bag. "Then it won't." That night, I sat on my balcony as the wind came in from the harbor, warm and heavy with spring. I thought about all the women like Alina's mother, like Loretta, like Julia, and like me. I opened my laptop and changed the title of my manuscript for the last time. From the testimony room to You Were Never Invisible. At the end of the preface, I added a new line. This story is mine. But I share it with anyone who has ever been expected to suffer in silence. May you speak loudly and without permission. I don't know if Raymond ever read it. I don't care. Because I did. And when I closed that final page, I finally felt what I'd been chasing for over a decade. Not revenge, not justice, not even forgiveness. Just freedom. If you've stayed with Naomi until now, thank you. Check the description for more powerful stories waiting to be heard.